The main objective of this first teaching unit, entitled Engagement Process for Athletes, Coaches, and Stakeholders, is to contribute to the fulfilling of their educational goal of the environmental projects by providing the knowledge and the competencies related to the athlete and coaches engagement and the strategy to promote and foster an environment to improve the motivational processes and the engagement quality. In the 3 videos dedicated to this unit, the focus will be on coaches. The plan of this first video is as follows. After an introduction about the definition of sport engagement and burnout, tertiary with explaining the processes will be present, the self-determination theory, SDT, and the achievement goal theory, AGT. The stakes and demand are high with regard to the increased professionalization in the field of high-performance sports. In particular, many sports training is organized around summer and winter competition. As a result, athletes are called upon through the years with no clearly defined period of relaxation and rest. Athletes, as well as their immediate environments, are subject to the pressure of results, media stakes, and financial imperative. In addition, internships and frequent travel or boarding in training center structure take all athletes away from their families and their usual social support networks. Some athletes and coaches may adapt to those physical and psychological demands more efficiently and engage in the sport with more success, whereas other athletes may not be as successful in adapting to those demands and may develop symptoms of burnout because of their maladaptation to the specific demands. Within this perspective, engagement can be defined as a positive, fulfilling state of mind that is characterized by emotional energy, physical strength, and cognitive liveliness. Emotional energy represents the feeling of being able to invest emotionally in relationships with peers, coaches. For example, athletes say, I feel that I'm one to other coach and peers. Second, physical strength represents the feeling energetic in performing daily tasks as training, like I have the feeling of having energy. And cognitive liveliness represents feeling that I have the mental capacity to think quickly about complex things and to be creative. For example, I feel I am contributing to new ideas. All these demands can contribute to increased workload factor and can lead athletes to state of psychological fatigue and more probably to stress manifest by reduced adherence to the objective of the training, to a progressive dislike and a burnout or even dropout of the practice. Burnout is characterized by reduced sense of accomplishments, represent the feeling of inefficacy tendencies to evaluate oneself negatively. Physical exhaustion feeling of physical fatigue is in relation to demand of training, and sport evaluation, lack of emotional energy and negative attitude towards sports. To better understand the quality of the athlete engagement, it's important to focus on the processes which conduct the athletes to the performance. Motivational process represents why athletes do what they do. To have an action on the motivation of athletes, it's necessary to understand what is motivation, how does motivation function, and what and how factors have an impact on athlete motivation.
One of the most relevant models trying to reply at these questions is the self-determination theory model from Dossi and Ryan. They propose 4 causal sequences. Different social factors, like the coach climate, have an impact on psychological mediators like basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In turn, these perceptions have an impact on motivation as defined by the self-determination theory. And finally, the motivational regulation leads to behavioral, cognitive, and affective consequences such as burnout or engagement. First of all, we focus on the social factors, particularly on the coach motivational climate. Self-determination theory suggests two distinct coaching styles, leading to qualitatively different outcomes. A coach can be controlling when he or she is perceived as authoritarian and coercive, and when athletes do not feel autonomous toward making sport-related choices. In contrast, a coach can be said as autonomy supportive when he or she is perceived as explaining and justifying his or her decision, encouraging individuals to participate in decisions, providing appropriate information, minimizing external pressure and demands, and giving them the opportunity to choose by themselves. The coaching styles is linked to the well-being engagement of athletes through the satisfaction of the three basic psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. It then appears that the perception of contextual factors will be able to feed the three human basic psychological needs. Indeed, a sub-theory integrated within the self-determination theory framework postulates that basic psychological need for autonomy, competence, and relatedness constitute the nutrients for the development of an autonomous motivation. The need for autonomy implies that the individual, the athletes, voluntarily decide his actions and that he is the one to perform this action in a way that is congruent with him or her. He, she can then totally endorse them. The individual needs for competence refers to the feeling of being effective in the interactions with the social environment and experiencing opportunities to exercise and express his capacities. And finally, the need for relatedness implies a sense of belonging to a group and the feeling of being connected to significant others. Several studies have shown that the fulfillment of the three basic psychological needs was linked to higher level of well-being. It also influences well-being through one's level of self-determination motivation. The self-determination theory conceptualizes sport motivation as a multidimensional construct. According to this theory, different types of motivated behavior reside along a continuum of self-determination. First, amotivation reflects an absence of motivation and refers to an athlete's participation in sport without particular reason. External and introjected regulations are viewed as controlled motivation because they describe situations where behaviors are not fully volitional or chosen, but rather emanated out of external or internal pressure. External pressure refers to reward and punishment, whereas internal pressure refers to guilt, for example. Identified, integrated, and intrinsic regulations represent autonomous motivation because they refer to behavior adopted for the feeling of enjoyment and interest in the activity and allowing individuals to achieve important goals, which are consistent with their values. Intrinsic motivation means that individuals perform the activity for the pleasure and satisfaction it provides them and for the pleasure of learning something new. Integrated regulation means that individuals join the activity in which they are able to fulfill important personal aims, as something consistent with their values and needs. Identified regulation applies to individuals who have identified why they are doing the activity, even if it is not interesting in itself. They work for the benefit they may reap from it. They also perceive that the action is initiated by themselves. They do it by choice. Introjected regulation deals with individuals who are doing the activity due to internal pressure, such as guilt. External regulation represents behavior regulated by external factors, such as reward or constraints. Amotivation refers to the case of individuals who do not perceive the links between their behavior and its consequences. It corresponds to a lack of autonomous and controlled motivation and result of non-rewarding activity and a feeling of incompetence in the activity. The effects of self-determination have been extensively examined by researchers with a focus on cognitive, emotional, and behavioral consequences of motivation. Overall, self-determined forms of motivation tend to predict positive outcomes like well-being, achievement, and engagement. In sport settings, autonomous motivation relates positively to a wide range of adaptive outcomes, such as well-being, continued participation, sport ethic, or performance, and negatively to several maladaptive outcomes, such as negative emotion and athlete burnout. The opposite pattern of result is observed for controlled motivation and amotivation. These motivational consequences on well-being are really very relevant regarding young athletes because they are exposed to a specific context with multiple demands.
The second theory is the achievement goal theory from Drake and Nichols. It is assumed that achievement-motivated individuals strive to demonstrate their ability in performance related to sport situations. AGT analyzes human behavior and experiences in relation to the demonstration of competency. Specifically, AGT assumes that the overall goal of action, which becomes the energizing force in achievement, is the desire to develop and demonstrate competency and to avoid demonstrating incompetency. The achievement goal theory defines different ways to define competency. The priority goals of athletes in sport are to demonstrate to oneself or to others a high competence and to avoid showing incompetency. This goal takes priority in sport, particularly in competition, because of the image of personal competency is important, because the athlete is responsible for the outcome, because success could be uncertain, and because success is socially valued. Originally, in this initial model, the achievement goal theory is based on a bidimensional approach, emphasizing two ways to define competency, then focusing on the pursuit of two different achievement goals. One is labeled ego or performance goal, with an emphasis on the demonstration of normative competency. The feeling of competency is based on external criteria, mainly the performance of other athletes, and using a normative comparison process. The second goal, labeled task or mastery goals, emphasizes on using self-referencing criteria for competence. The feeling of competence is based on self-referencing criteria like my improvement, and we are using a personal comparison. The researches on achievement goal theory has also considered another dimension of competency, the valence of competency. It has been argued that competency can have a positive appetitive approach or an aversive avoidance valence. With a consideration of this second dimension of competence, Elliott and McGregor developed the hierarchical model of approach and avoidance motivation, which propose 4 types of goals according to the way to feel competence and the orientation. For the approach orientation, a fleet approaching a positive and desirable event, a fleet seeks to achieve something positive such as progress and victory. For the avoidance orientation, a fleet avoids a negative event. They try to remove a negative thing such as stagnation, progression, regression, or defeat. For mastery approach, goals reflect a focus on surpassing a previous personal performance on a task or performing a task as well as possible. Mastery avoidance goals reflect a focus on not doing worse than previous performance or not making mistakes. These goals combine a desirable definition of competency with an undesirable focus on avoiding incompetence. When emphasizing on performance approach goal, the focus is on demonstrating competency to others or not to outperforming others. Finally, performance avoidance goals reflect a focus on avoiding the demonstration of comparative inability or not being outperformed by others. These different goals conduct to various behaviors. For a fleet with high level in mastery approach orientation, the athlete choose the challenging sport task. They have a high persistence and effort. They looking for useful information to learn and to figure out effectiveness in a conflict situation. When the athletes are setting mastery avoidance, they behave with less persistence, they are feeling more anxiety, and they have lower physiological activation and they are expressing more disorganization and using procrastination. When emphasizing performance approach goals, the athlete choose tasks with medium to high difficulty, high perseverance and effort. They have negative attitude toward helping behavior. They focus on the goal rather than the mean. Finally, a fleet with high in performance avoidance orientation conduct a fleet to do choice. They present low self-determined motivation. They are devaluating the task. They are searching irrelevant information and refusing help. They express more negative emotion like anxiety and shame, and they have low sport performance. One of the fundamental assumptions of the AGTE is the central role of the social situation in motivational process. That is the nature of an individual experience in a human context to be a function of the degree to which tasks and ego criteria for success are perceived as salient in the context. 2 situation-focused constructs are highlighted: a task involving climate, which reflects the athlete perception that the environment focuses on the learning process, that trying hard and improving are valued, and that every member of the team has an important role to play. For the ego involving climate, reflects a psychological environment centered on the demonstration of normatively referenced competency. In an ego-involving environment, a fleet perceives that they will be punished if they make mistakes, that the coach recognize and reinforce the better player and encourage individual comparison. AGT postulates that the motivational climate induced by coaches' behavior should lead to the adoption of different achievement goals. Elliott extended the original theory by assuming that the achievement environment can have an indirect effect on the adoption achievement goals by altering individual perception of competency. More precisely, it is assumed that a task involving climate should lead a higher feeling of competency, and an ego involving climate, conversely, should lead to a lower feeling of competency. Finally, The motivational climate is expected to have a direct implication for athlete engagement and burnout.